Well, hi everybody. I want to show you next steps on your small box project. And I'm making a shell, but as far as I know, I'm the only one making a shell. I think everybody else is doing veggies of some kind. Um, you might find something else that'll work. Think about it. There's probably other things that you might have around that you could copy. I'm looking in my view here and I see a pencil sharpener on my, over right there. I mean, you could do it in the form of a pencil sharpener. You just need some kind of an object that's kind of solid. It will have some interior volume. So I want to show you where I'm going now with the shell. So what I have started doing, so remembering that our shell has these little, these spikes that, I find this camera very, very tricky. Okay, so it has these lines of spikes. There's another line of spikes. There's some really nice ones that come off of the edge here. Right there. So that's what I am attempting to get organized here. So I'm taking clay, I'm using coils, and I started by drawing lines and trying to space them appropriately, and then a little bit of water on my serrated scraper and coming along and roughening. You want to moisten and roughen anything that you're going to add a coil to. So all along here. And then, get this down where you can see it better. So if you see the concept here, these are, I'm going to be cutting away to make the spikes. But I want them lined up, so the best way to get them lined up is to start with one long line. So I'm going to take some clay, and this is clay that I've wedged, and roll it into a coil of more or less the appropriate thickness. Now watch how I'm putting it on. I'm going to squeeze it on. So I'm pressing and wiggling. And that's how we make sure that it's going to stay stuck. I'm getting some nice patterns just from the fingers there, but that's all going to change. So bit by bit, building up these ridges. So there are lots of forms that this would be an appropriate way to work on them. If you've got anything that, you know, some of these vegetables have interesting ridges on them. So I'm using just a little bit of water to make this line flow. So now I have another one of these ridges, and I'll be doing one more that will come along this edge and will give that nice beautiful edge. There's probably one more yet. Let me see. Yeah, one more yet that'll go along here. But what I'd like to show you now, just so that you don't have to watch every single bit of this in real time, is how to cut it open. So I was originally planning to do all of my detail work before cutting it open. But the more I thought about it, I realized that these ridges, especially after I cut them away and make spikes out of them, are going to be kind of fragile. And you need to use a little bit of force to cut the piece open. So I'm going to do that now. So I'm going to go ahead and cut it open and then hollow it out. So I'd like you to see how to do that. So taking your cutting wire, and by the way, I am continuing to, I'm always rinsing my hands in a container. Over enough time, this is going to fill up with slip down here that I can recycle. I'll be letting it settle and pouring off the water, and then that clay can be used again. So don't throw away your clay. It's too hard to get another bag of clay right now. So in order to cut it open, so the idea here is we're going to cut it open. We're going to hollow it out so that no part of it is more than 1/2 inch thick. And then we're going to stick it back together. And in sticking it back together, you will never know where it was cut apart. That's a separate action from making the lid. The lid is going to be in some other place. We don't know yet exactly where the lid's going to be. It doesn't really matter right now because you're going to close it all back up. So what you want to do is look at your form and think about, where can I cut this in half where I'll be able to get to all parts of it so that I can hollow it out. So in other words, if I cut across here, it's going to be hard to get into here. And remember, we have to have all parts of it no more than 1/2 inch thick. Same thing with this end. This end is in itself no more than 1/2 inch thick, I think, by the time I cut away. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. But if you have a bend, some squashes are bent, then you need to think about, where can you cut so you'll really be able to reach inside. And on some forms, you just might have to cut in more than one place. But I'm going to go ahead and cut. I'm going to slice it. People are always terrified to do this, but you're gonna be putting it back together. So I've got now a place I can easily get into here. You're always going to be checking to see how thick it is, and I think it's good to start by figuring out, oh, here's my cat. Here she is. Ah, that's Shady. She loves to just sit behind me. So look your form over very carefully and figure out where you're going to need to hollow it, because if it's thinner, you don't have to. So there's some areas that are not going to have to be hollowed out, but I like to outline it so I can see exactly where the wall's going to be. And then you start scooping. Now, if by chance you take out more than you should have, you can mend it. We want to be scooping it out while it's still soft enough that it can be stuck back together, so it can't be more than leather hard. If it is more than leather hard, if it's getting a little bit dry on you, you should wet it. And hopefully it's not gotten totally dry. Once it's totally dry, as you know, it's not going to work to wet it down. It'll crumble. So I've got an area here that's really thin. I don't want to go any farther into that. But so far what I'm feeling, the rest of it feels just about right. I probably could have cut this. I could have gone a little more into the center because this piece is going to be a little harder to do just because it's bigger, but it's not going to be bad. So I'm going to take, again, just make a line so that that's to guide you so you don't accidentally take too much. And then you start scooping. So it's amazing how this works because the first time you do it, you'll think it's going to be impossible. And then it's just not that hard to do. It's not hard at all. So the best time to do this piece is just a little bit on the wet side. The best time to do it is when it's starting to feel really firm on the outside. Because if you do it too soon, it's going to bend while you scoop out, and then it's going to be a little bit harder to restore it to what it looked like before. But we're going to just score and slip and put it back together. Now, if you want to just have it as just a sculpture and not a box, you put it back together and just leave it like that. You are going to need to have a pinhole in it because if you don't, it will blow up in the kiln. And we wouldn't want that. You don't ever want to trap an airspace inside. You always want to give it just a little release for the pressure, and all it needs for that is a pinhole. It doesn't need a big hole at all, and it doesn't need more than one. So you can put that pinhole any place. Usually you try to find a spot where it really doesn't show, and you'll be able to fire the piece without any worries. So I'm just making sure that I'm all the way. See, this is where you want to think about where you're cutting, because here I can feel that it's thick. So this is where you go in and remove more clay. But you can see that this is a way easier way to work than if you were trying to construct this piece hollow. You know, if you were trying to build it from coils, it would be really hard to do a shape like this. It can be done, but this is much easier. Okay, so I'm just checking. I'm checking all around because if there's any one spot that's too thick, that could be an area that will blow in the firing. I'm trying to not have anything too thick. And just keep feeling it. Now I feel this area right here got a little too thin, so I'm just going to scoot some clay into there. Ideally, everything is the same thickness. That's just a good policy always with anything you make out of clay. Just try to keep everything the same thickness, because if it's not the same thickness, it dries differently. Sometimes there's warping because one area got dry faster than another, and it's just more likely to get through the firing well if it's not uneven. So if it's going to be a box, you should take the time to get the inside really smooth. If you're just going to make a sculpture out of it and nobody's going to see the inside, I think you can get away with leaving it rough. But I am going to make this into a box. So I want to be sure that I have a good clean interior. Now down here, this is where it is more than ½ inch thick, but these are the ridges that I'm going to be cutting away. And by the time I get that all cut away, it's not going to be as thick. However, just to be on the safe side, I'm going to try to get in there as far as I can. And if you really needed to, it would be okay to cut across here, and then you'll be able to get in there. I'm going to just stick it back together. But I don't think I have to do it on this one. So there we are. Smooth out the interior. And then so I'm going to stick this all back together because the lid is going to be in a different place. And once I open it back up for the lid, I can also do some finishing on the inside and correct anything that I didn't do well enough the first time around. So this piece, this looks really thick, but it's actually not. It's never more than ½ inch thick, so I'm not going to do anything there. I'm going to smooth this out. And there we go. So it's now been hollowed out. And now it's time to put it back together. So I'm going to take, so all of this clay that I dug out is still nice and soft, and I can use it again. So I'm going to, this is a form of wedging, what I'm doing right now. I'm squeezing all the air out of it. So that clay is not to be wasted. This is precious. So I'm going to put it back in my plastic bag and close up the bag. If this was feeling a little on the dry side, I would dunk it in water. And you can even mush the clay with water and get it softer. And then that goes in the bag. So always rinsing into some container, not down your sink, as clay will clog up your drain. So if you just have a little bit on your hands, you know, I've got a little bit on my hands, that I can go to the sink with that. But always do your rinse first in a container. So now I'm going to put the shell back together. So just a little bit of water is okay. If you keep working it, you'll have slip. It's going to make slip right in place. And I like working this way because I know that the slip is the same color as the clay. It's not going to be some different color. So we'll score and slip both surfaces. Always get them both. Otherwise, may come apart later. So here we go. Let's stick it back together. Now, a lot of times you'll find that it distorted a little bit in the process of all the digging out, but that's okay. Just wiggle it, press it back together. Always wiggle the clay a little bit when you're trying to put pieces together. And now you can, yeah, see it distorted a little bit, but that's okay. You can add clay if you need to. So here, where I kind of messed it up, I'll just add a little bit of clay. My clay is still really soft, so I'm able to just press some clay onto it. But if your clay is leather hard, you should wet it, score it. You need to create some slip if the clay has gotten leather hard. This clay is still, it was really a little too soft. It's going to be okay, but it's better to have it a little more leather hard. Okay, so now I've got it put back together. And now I can finish what I was starting to do. This is funny. I'm not quite sure how it happened, but I cut a hole into it that I really don't want to have. So that hole is what makes it look more like a shell. But for finishing this detail work, it's preferable to have an enclosed space that creates a pillow of air that you can press against. So if there's an opening, when you press, the clay will dent in. If there's no opening, you can put pressure on it. And right now we want to be able to put pressure on it. So for the moment, I am going to close this up. Later on, I can open it again, but I don't want any escape for the air right now. So I'm just going to make that seal up. And now what happens is, assuming that I have it sealed and don't have any air escape. Yeah, I can tell because I can push on it and it kind of pushes back. It's not denting in. That's what I want. So that now I can proceed with developing the details. When you get those details all done, you are going to be putting a pinhole in at the very least. If you're going to turn it into a box with a lid, you're going to, so on this I will cut somewhere, I'm not sure where yet. Probably I'll cut along here and the lid will come out this way. But if you're going to have a lid, you don't have to worry about a pinhole because there's no longer a total seal there. But if it's totally sealed up like this, you will need to poke it with a pin, and I'll show you. Well, I don't have my needle tool here, but what you would do is find a spot after you've done all the details. You will find a spot where it just won't show. Could be anywhere, could be up here, could be in here, could be anywhere. And you're going to take your needle tool. This is not a needle tool, but if it was, and you're just going to poke in until you can feel that you've gotten all the way inside. And then that hole is going to allow the air pressure to escape as the piece heats up in the kiln. So that's it for this movie. I certainly hope this filmed, because if it didn't, I got to do the whole thing over. But we shall see. I think I've shown you enough about how to start working on kind of the finishing process. So how to cut it open, hollow it out, and stick it back together. And then also starting to work on any kind of raised details that you might have. There's some squash that's very, gourds that are very warty, and you could be building those up. It just depends on the kind of shape that you're making. There's so many possibilities. So I look forward to seeing what you all are going to create next time.